So thank you so much for the opportunity. I want to commend the Vice Chancellor of Summit University for doing a marvelous job creating a university that is unique in terms of intent, the embeddedness of the university within community, and the focus on integrating time-appropriate skills at the core of the education that is being offered to the students enrolled in the university. And it's not a surprise, given the fact that we know who Dr. Musa Haibinu is when he was a doctoral student and the type of thoughts he venerated if given the opportunity to provide leadership for any university in the world. Want to commend your progress and the hard work put in by all the faculty members and staff of the university. And I want to thank the leadership of the Department of Political Science for bringing me on board to join the two distinguished speakers who are part of today's conversation. And I want to thank Dr. Mutiu Adegboyega, a friend to many of my friends, because when many of my friends saw the poster for this event, they reached out to me that they were your mate in the primary school, and one of them is also a friend of Dr. Musa Ibinu, in person of Dr. Professor Ismail Ladele Ladipo, who is now a faculty somewhere in the United Arab Emirates. So he reached out
Okay.
to me. Yeah, yeah,
I see.
yeah. So a good number of them.
Okay.
It's a very small world. It's a very small world.
We
And
thank
I
God.
really appreciated your contributions, the light you shed on the issues, particularly some of the fundamental underpinnings of the new electoral act. And one must commend all of the stakeholders who contributed in one way or the other to give us this very transformative electoral act. I'll be speaking to elucidate further on some of the issues you highlighted, and at the same time to speak to areas that we are concerned about as stakeholders going forward. It's going to be difficult for the INEC to be the best reviewer of the gaps in the electoral process, particularly their own understanding and rendering of the DFAS. And that is why when there are litigation issues, the judge is not going to be INEC. The judge is going to be the court, who's vested with the power to give decision about the appropriate interpretation of the acts that we are discussing today. I think that's very important. And finally, I'm going to be talking about the misleading notion that technology insulates against electoral fraud. I mean, it's one such issue that we actually discuss at the Leaders of Africa, an institute that I co-founded with some of my colleagues here in the United States. We brought in stakeholders, including our friend Samuel Itodo, the other lady in charge of CDC, the Campaign for Democracy, Idaya, and we explored this issue in depth. And one of the surprising issues in that series is that they have this 100% faith in technology. Unfortunately, even in the United States, there is no such certainty and assurance that the technology is a silver bullet to issues of electoral integrity, transparency, and worldview. That is not necessarily so. Because when we understand and situate these issues in context, we become open critically to areas that need to be given attention, particularly the human component of technology. Technologies are never substitute to humans. They can play the roles of human. Technology cannot circumvent itself, but humans can circumvent and manipulate technology to reflect their own intentions. I'm speaking to some of those issues. And obviously, I'll be speaking to some other issues that INEC needs to consider. For example, look at the election in Osun State. Who was the man in charge of it? There was a vice chancellor that was going through at the point in time under a massive integrity accountability issue. And such individual was brought in to preside over an important election. That begs some issues about the choice of individuals who are associated, and there seems to be too much trust on our colleagues in the academia that with them the integrity of the electoral process might be guaranteed. I love them. We are colleagues, and I appreciate the good work. There are men and women of integrity among us. But possibly you forget the fact that we might not necessarily be different from the politicians. A majority of the folks who are involved in wrong activities. That possibly was discounted as an oversight responsibility in terms of monitoring of the activities and selection of who is worthy of presiding over such, because these are issues that I think needs to be interrogated. We need to raise problems, frame issues around these issues so that we can create an electoral process that is more or less perfect. I know that is utopia. It's not going to be possible. Anyway, to get to the substance of my contribution and talking points, one of the things I really want to say and applaud about the Electoral Act is the redefinition of overvoting. And I'm happy that Dr. Mutiu Adegoke eloquently speak to this issue. And one thing that I think we need to
I will not
educate the
fine you
public.
for in dollars. So if you don't get it again, it's Agboke. If you
Oh,
mistaking it
Agboke.
again, you pay dollars. You will pay dollars.
Apologies for that. Okay, Dr. Mutiu Agboke. Thank you so much. Apologies for
Thank you,
that.
sir. Thank you.
Apologies for that. Yeah, my pleasure. Yeah, so it's the issue of definition of overvoting. And I think this is one area INEC need to educate the populace and even the politicians. Because it seems that the politicians are still working with the operational definition of overvoting. And that was why some of the things, cruel things that happened in Osun State actually took place. To some of us, the judgment of the court was not unexpected. Votings went until late hours in Ede. I grew up in Ede. I have friends and I monitor the process. And when the case went to court, we were anticipating that some of these things will solve it. And exactly, they came to the fore. So it's important that INEC actually considers that. And if the politicians are actually more aware, and I think that's even a blessing for the entire system, because working with the previous operational definition means that they can commit blunders that is going to work against them eventually. And I think that actually happened in Ede. But for the benefit of those who are yet to be educated on the Electoral Act, the current definition of overvoting in the Electoral Act says that the number of accredited voters refers to the number of intended voters accredited to vote in an election on the election day. Previously, overvoting was in relation to the number of votes cast at an election in any polling unit, exceeding the number of registered voters in that polling unit. And that definition formed the basis for many electoral litigations in the country. But right now, the way it is, it appears to me that the Electoral Act gives us a better definition that is more likely to contribute to us having elections where the intentions, the aspirations, and the preferences of the people is going to count, all else equal. Attention to all else equal. Because overvoting within the context of the current Electoral Act is to market the path from what it used to be in the past. In the past, it used to be based on the number of registered voters. And remember, The ways the number of registered voters were documented in the past is also a marked departure from what it is currently. There is improvement in both layers in terms of redefinition and the way that we document our registered voter this time around. So I think we got it better in that aspect of the Electoral Act. Another issue, which I believe has really contributed to having a more elastic engagement and conversation and interface between the candidate and the electorate, is the encouragement of early primaries. I think that's another massive one in the Electoral Act. And Dr. Mutiu Agboke eloquently elucidated that. But one thing I just love to highlight here is that we need to educate the electorate on how they can take advantage of this opportunity to create extended engagement with the candidate themselves. Because when people look at this electoral act, the electoral act were not crafted with just with the highest fees on the politician, the contestants themselves. The electoral act was created so that the electorate could also be better informed, so that the process could be better strengthened. I think we need to do a better job educating the masses on how they can take advantage of these early party primaries to know the candidate better, to engage, deconstruct their manifestorial plan without possibly making them better positioned to make informed electoral decisions that can help contribute to the elicitation of good governance in the country. So that's a big one that I think we need to look into, and folks in the civil society spaces across the country, I think they can actually look into this and work with INEC and some of these international stakeholders to actually use this window to educate the masses better. And the other thing is the issue of the financial independence of INEC. That's a massive one to me. It's really, really massive. And that the fact that the money that is meant to fund the election must be released at least 1 year before the election, I think is going to assist us to overcome some of the encumbrances we have encountered in the past, financing and planning adequately for election. Because election planning, it requires a lot of work that we, the masses, the electorate, often do not actually appreciate because we are not open to what it entails. INEC does a lot of work, at the back end, giving insight from colleagues and friends who are staff and leading icons within the establishment of INEC. I think that's a massive one for me in the area of the Electoral Act. And the other thing is the issue of the provisions for people with disability and special needs. I think that makes us to be more positioned to have inclusive electoral process. I think that's a big one. And INEC needs to do a better job celebrating this and educating particularly the component of our population dealing with one physical challenge, disability issue or the other. I think that's the big one. And the technological changes, which forms the basis of the litigation in Osun State and the exposure of the fraud in the process, I think that's the big one. And again, my position is that the BFAS and the IRF, wherever it is called, they are no silver bullet to conducting a fraud-free elections. But the technological changes, which allows the use of BFAS for voters accreditation, I think it's a big one. It's a really, really big one and a massive jump in the process. And the fact that INEC has been given the legal backing for the transmission of results in accordance with the procedures determined by the Commission. That emphasis in accordance with the procedure determined by the Commission really makes the process to be insulated from the interference of folks at the ends of appeal particularly the ruling party and politicians generally. I think that's another big one about the electoral act and which the electorate need to celebrate going into subsequent elections in the country. The other big one, which I really applaud, and which Dr. Agboke, you actually also
I need
elucidated
more
on, was
dollars from you,
also,
and you have to pay it.
I'm so sorry, is the issue of death of electoral candidate. The art doesn't just stop at making provision for replacement. The art actually went in depth, speaking to some of the specific. For example, when before the commencement of the polls, if a candidate dies, the art gives provision that for the postponement of the election and to recommence the election within 17 days of the death. And even the act went as far as predicting the possibility that a candidate might die before the announcement of the final winner or final result. And the act also made provision for the suspension of the election for not more than 21 days. And the act went deeper, talking about some more specifics. For example, if elections are being conducted into a legislative or legislative position, if somebody should die, the act also makes provision for what needs to be done. And I think I really love that depth. And they also make provision for gubernatorial, presidential, and candidates contesting within the FCs into council elections in the FCT. What needs to be done in terms of replacement of a running mate? Are we going to replace the candidate? Are we going to have a new running mate? Or what is it? Who's going to take over the substantive primary candidate on the ballot? I think that's another big area that the Heart actually did a good job. And the other one I like to speak about is the issue that pertains to exclusion of political appointees. And we saw the benefit of that during the last primaries. When we reflect back on what happens during the primaries conducted by the APC, we see that one of the things that actually possibly contributed to the emergence of Bola Ahmed Tinubu was the fact that people like Amechi was required by virtue of the act to resign. And that means that, for example, he couldn't leverage the resources of his then ministry to fund his election. And I believe that's a positive one. And this has a lot of benefit, particularly fostering the emergence of the younger ones as candidates representing political parties. Because one major issue is funding of primaries. And those who are incumbent, they have resources, or those who are appointed into positions, they have the benefit of using state resources voted, for example, to their ministry to support their emergence in the primaries. They may even create a system whereby they take advantage of their position as an elected official to manipulate the working machinery of the party in their favor, possibly because somebody is looking for contract for this and that benefit from them. So having them resign, relinquish their position before they can be eligible to participate in the electoral process as a candidate or delegate, I think that's a big plus that will really open up the political space going forward. And then on the issue of BFAS, which I love to talk more about. One of the things I love about BFAS, which the Vice Chancellor of Summit University is going to, really need to look into, is that the BFAS is built of artificial intelligence solution. It's built of the concept of artificial intelligence solution. So one of the ways you can actually get to understand the limitations of what the BFAS can do is to interrogate the question, what are the possible limitations of artificial intelligence solution? And this is going to make the people to get at the fact that it's never going to be a substitute to replacing humans. Neither is it going to be a silver bullet to having fraud-free election. I think that's a big part of it. And one of the things I love about the BFAS is the fact that it has this double layer functionality. It can identify, it can accredit voters' fingerprint, and it can also identify their facial recognition before voting. And that gives us double integrity layer for ensuring all else equal, attention to all else equal, that the accredited voter is the one that the accredited voter that has been identified is the one that actually casted the vote. But this is a flip. The computer is not casting the vote. It's the human being that is casting the votes. And there are people associated with that process. If any of those in charge of the process compromises the remaining part of the process, leading to the casting of the vote, we are going to have a repeat of what happened in Osun State. And all you need to do is to focus on your stronghold. I grew up in a political family. I could recall when I was in the high school, I worked as one of the ward secretaries for the youth union. I was involved in mobilizing voters. I think we have somebody who's, yeah, thank you. I was part of mobilizing vote for him. I was part of, I attended political meetings. And in those meetings, they talk about rigging. Rigging is part of the process. Rigging is not something that is not discussed within political parties. So most political parties, they go into the electoral cycle having a rigging plan. So, and that means that a lot of attention needs to be paid to this by INEC, because rigging revolves around the people, and rigging can also revolve around the technology. They can compromise the technology as well. And that implies there is a need for INEC to do commission more studies, exploring how the technology itself can be compromised. They've been doing some work on this according to what we know, but they need to do better, because the technology itself can be compromised. It can be rendered, perfunctory, not functional. And the people around the technology can also be compromised. And that begs the conversation. What else do we need to do differently to address possible gap in the process? And the other thing I love about BFAS, and I would like Dr. Mutiu to actually correct me on this, is that it does not require internet connection to function during election day. This is yet to be well known based on my understanding by the people.
Yes, only during the accreditation, it is offline. The network is only required only for transmission of the results. Exactly. You are right.
Yeah. So we need to educate people more about this, because these are ways that we can actually reinforce the trust and the process put in place by INEC. I think that is a big one that we really need to look into. And there are other issues that BFAS will allow us to overcome. For example, forging of resource sheets is one of them. Falsification of votes at polling units, it's one big one that BFAS is intended to help us overcome. And it's also expected to help us overcome some of the issues associated with the collation of false results. I think it's important to bring our university more into this system to explore each of those objectives. And this is where INEC need to be relating with stakeholders like Tech Fund. Can Tech Fund commission a grant that allows our university, our faculty members, to frame issues around the functionalities of BFAS, the performativity of we don't have to wait on the problem. Science has gone far ahead in time. There are many methodologies that we can use to elicit, to troubleshoot beforehand, before the fact, potential issues that may arise and compromise the process. Yeah, I'll be running on very soon. I think that's one area that INEC needs to do a better job. And the other area is that it does appears to me that INEC do not really understand the operation of its own technology. When I listened and read about the position articulated by INEC in the court case, electoral court case in Osun State, I struggle with it as somebody with a science background and who understand the back end operation of computer system and the artificial system, and who's been involved in this space, learning and learning about it. It became so difficult for me to understand the logic, the intuition behind what INEC is saying in court. So what this appears to me is that INEC needs to ask itself whether they have a good understanding of how the technology itself operates and the implication of saying we are synchronizing this, because it's just a basic thing that doesn't need rocket science to get in depth into some of the issues at the call of the litigation in court. When I read the defense of the PDP, they were talking about primary data, they were talking about secondary data. The fact that a data is the storage or the repository of the data changes doesn't change the status of the data, doesn't make a primary data a secondary data. We deal with all these issues. These are interpretative issues, more or less, that are settled. And I find it difficult to understand, and this seems to be suggesting to me that INEC itself needs to do a better job. And the other area I like to end, because of time, encumbrances, is that we need to be aware of the fact that technology is not a silver bullet. Technology works better when we have the right human environment. And what is evident from Osun State is that we have not done enough creating the right human environment to make technology produce the desired result. One, people that are involved, the presiding officer, the returning officer, they can be compromised. And what is happening, the admission of PDP, that there were cases of overvoting. And the evidence provided by APC means that people were compromised. And look at it, the decision-making process of INEC. A vice chancellor at the University of Lagos with issues of about 20 billion naira misappropriation or within that range. And, and we are still waiting for the white paper on this case, being called upon to be involved, to be a major figure in such an election, raises some concern about the decision-making process of INEC. And to me as an individual, I expect litigation to look in that direction. For the government to start looking into the account, the activities of other folk, not just the staff of INEC involved, other individuals involved in the process. Did money exchange hands? What happened on that system? I think getting into that will assist us to look to get a better understanding of some of the changes that we need to make by within the context of deciding which human elements should be appointed or should be called upon to be part of this process. Lecturers in our universities are good, but we are also aware that a good number of them, they are involved in some of these scandalous activities, sex for grade, money for grade, what have you. That means that they might not necessarily be people of integrity. So we need to have metrics that will guide us in appointing the best among them, the ones that are closer to sanity, expected to be accorded such a very important process. Otherwise, if that component of it is not sorted out, we might be running into issues, because it means that there are potential individuals that can be compromised. And whatever has a higher vulnerability of being compromised means that the electoral process could as much be subject to vulnerability of higher fraud and the likelihood of such an incident that has happened in Osun State. I have no doubt that INEC is well prepared to conduct the next election, and we look forward to them. Thank you. So it's now, yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I look forward to contributions from other speakers.
الصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. سبحان